Oh. Honda. Here, fishy, fishy, fishy. All right, welcome back to Tank Slap TV. We are back on Bradford's Honda 250R. I can't wait to get this thing going. We've got only a couple more things to do, and we're going to hopefully finish that up this episode. But while I was gone, we went ahead and did some of the touch-up paint, got that taken care of, cleaned up a little bit more of the rust, and went ahead and wiped down some more of the plastics and get them looking good again. So the next thing that we have to do is try and tackle these tires. And I will tell you what, they are so corroded. This is gonna suck. All right, we've got the rear wheel and what's left of the tire up on the bench. And for those of you who know what's going on, you'll know why I had to cut this tire off. This bead is so corroded on here, it won't budge. I can't get a spoon in there. I can't do anything. So I went ahead and cut the edge of the tire off here, and the only thing left to do is get down in here and try and cut into the bead and bust that bead so I can get the tire off the rim. Once I do that, I can go ahead and clean up the aluminum on this, get that all squared away, get the new tire put back on. So kind of a boring process. I'm not going to talk you through too much of it. So hang tight while I get that. That is nasty. Look at that. Ooh. So we'll go ahead and clean this rim up, scrub it down, get all this gunk out of here, pop the new tire on, and call it a day. Well, so as you can see, I've had the wheel sitting up here. I've been moving around and doing some stuff. All this is just nasty dust that is coming off of here, corrosion, all sorts of gross stuff. So what we're gonna do is get the vacuum in here, clean all that up, try and get as much of the loose particles off. Then we'll hit it with a wire brush and see how much damage is done to it. Hopefully, it's still pretty solid. It looks like it's good, so I guess we'll see. So hang tight, we'll get that taken care of. And of course, in good old tank slap fashion, I lost the footage of me actually cleaning up this wheel. I threw it on the wire wheel for a while. I put some rust dissolver on there, some corrosion killer. It cleaned up pretty well. It definitely has some pitting, as you can tell, but it's still really strong. It didn't warp the wheel. I'm going to go ahead and roll with it for now, only because these rims are actually getting pretty hard to find. We're going to go ahead and mount everything new up on it, new rim strip. I put a coat of paint in there. We'll get it all back together. I'm going to roll with this for a while. If I do find a new rim, I think I'll suggest that we get that and just swap it out. But for now, I think it'll work just fine. Well, we got the tire all mounted up, and I did throw a new rim lock in here from Motion Pro. It didn't have one, so we definitely want to have one of those in here, being a dual sport. Everything else looks pretty good. We'll clean up the rim before we throw it on. Next problem is the brakes. All rusted, nasty in here. We got to get that all cleaned up. So we'll take care of that. And the shoes, we're going to have to go ahead and replace these pads. When I took it off, the pads busted off them, pretty nasty. So I do have a brand new set. We'll throw these on and get this all cleaned up. And we'll go ahead and get this all back together and get that wheel back on. All right, so we're moving right along here on Brad's 250. Before we get this front wheel and the new brake on and get the front end bolted back together, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this broken plastic, rotted out piece of fender that we have up here. Now, with the 86 250, unfortunately, it is just impossible to find this fender. Even the used ones that you find on eBay are really beat up, and they still want $60, $70 for them. So we did find a company called DC, and they make a replacement fender for the 600. And the only difference is this little cutout over here for the cable bracket. Well, we're going to go ahead and reroute that and put this fender on because I don't really care about that little bracket. We made that decision. So let's go ahead and get all that stuff done, get this fender on, we get the bike back up and get the new brakes on and the front wheel. And we'll have a roller again. as you might have seen when I cut the boots off, lots of rust, deterioration in here. The seals are definitely blowing out on this one. The other one is good. That's why it didn't feel too bad. But so we'll clean up that and get a new seal for it. And hopefully we can bring this around. But I do believe that the area, yeah, that's pretty good. Where the shock moves is still looking pretty good. So we can clean this up. I don't think it'll have any effect. Hopefully. So we'll try and do that. If not, we're going to be buying some used shocks. These XL forks are pretty simple. They're not too difficult to work on. So I always want to get the oil out as much as I can. This fork oil is probably going to be pretty nasty. So we'll press it a little bit. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Stinks. That's how you can tell you got the good stuff right there. If you don't have a fork holder or a tube holder, I'll throw some cardboard in there. I'm not going to crank this down too tight. Let me get that in there so it helps from marring it up too much. I just need it to hold it in there for now. So that's good. At the bottom of these, you're going to have a number 6 hex. And this is what's going to be holding the rod assembly inside the tube. So we'll want to crank that off of there. All right, bust that loose and pull this bolt out. Make sure you stay nice and unorganized over here with all your parts, so you lose everything. All right, there. Now this is going to spew excess oil, so I like to do it like that. Here we go. Ooh, yummy. You look in here and see all these chunks and this dirt that had gotten down in there, and it coagulated. And we'll tilt the fork tube up and just let it all drain out for a while. Make sure everything's out of there. It's sticking to the walls and everything, so let it sit for a good little while. Okay, so your top cap's going to be a 17 millimeter for this one. Usually these aren't on there too tight, but you might need to break it free a little bit. There we go. And then in here is going to be your spring assemblies. A couple washers. Make sure you remember what order they go in. So you're going to have a short spring. And this is why I like to do it this way, because now as I'm pulling this out, all the oil's going into the bin. Push out, I'll get the washer. There's a washer that goes between this shorter spring and then your long spring. And as you bring it out, you're going to notice you're drawing all that nasty oil out. And then you can take the damper and just throw it up there. We'll slide that all right out. All right. On the bottom side of this, you're going to have a really short spring. That's going to go first. That goes on first. Then you get this guy. Then you get the long spring, and then a washer, and then the short spring. And that's it. Fully disassembled. So we'll clean this tube out. We'll pop the old seal out of here. Get the new seals in, clean everything up, and then just put it back together. Okay, for the seal, what we're really in here for is the seal's held in by a little circlip. Get in there, and then we'll clean out the gunk and grime in here, and we got to get the old seal out. There's a lot of rusty looking muck in this one. So these are aluminum tubes. A little trick I like to do to get these out really easy without sitting there scraping and marring is I use a heat gun. I don't use a torch. I use the heat gun, get it up to temp. And the whole reason I'm using a heat gun versus a torch is I don't want a bunch of hot spots that can possibly screw this cylinder up here, this tube. So I'm just going to slowly heat the aluminum up on the outside, get it to expand just a little bit, and that seal should pop out of there really easily. And I do this every time. I've never had an issue with it. It works really well. I do the same thing when I go to put the new seal back in. Okay, now ideally you'll want to use a seal puller, but a larger flathead works pretty well. You should be able to get right in here now. And with it being heated up like that, look at that, you don't have to put a lot of pressure on. So you don't risk marring up this sidewall here. Oh, look at that. Pretty gross down in there. You also will have another spacer. I can see it right there, but there's a lot of rust in there. This is definitely letting fluid through. So if I can't free that up and pop it out, there you go. There you go. So you have that other spacer. The spacer goes underneath the seal. It's often tricky when you pull that apart and you forget and you look at it, you would think it would go over top. It makes sense, but yep, it definitely goes underneath that seal. Pretty easy. When we come back, we'll show you how to put the new seal in and then show you in order how this goes back together in case you ever need to reference that. All right, we're going to pretend we know what we're doing when we go to put these back together. We're going to show you this in reverse order. First things first, that thick washer right on the top. We got to put the seal in. Seal has one side that has a small groove down the middle of it, and the other side has a much larger groove. The smaller groove goes up. I do the same thing with the heat gun here, just warm it up a little bit. Small bit of fork oil around. Pop it down in, and it should press in pretty easily. All right, that's seated, so we'll go ahead and get the snap ring back down in there. Make sure it legitimately snaps into place. Now get the drain screw, put the drain screw back in. Then you're going to take the small spring on the damper. Make sure that drops all the way down in. And then on the bottom, you're going to make sure it comes through the hole. Just like that. There you good. I like to throw a little fork oil. Just lube up the seal a little bit. I'm going to slide the damper in. All the way to the bottom. And you should feel the threads at the bottom. With it all the way down, go ahead and put your bolt back in. Once you tighten this down, that's what's going to keep that fork tube in. So pretty simple. All right, here we got the assembly back together. So we're going to take the dust seal and slide it on. Pop it down into place. Should sit in there firmly. Now you'll notice here that the fork is collapsed. That means this tube is setting all the way down in the base. We're going to take it over here and put it on the vise. And we're going to fill it. All right, filling these is pretty easy. Just make sure that they're vertical, upright, good solid base. We keep the tube collapsed, and all the springs are out of it right now, so we don't have any internals in there. This calls for a 10 weight fork oil. So 10 weight, 10W. You can use 15 for a little bit firmer of a ride. And it book says about 300 milliliters, but what I like to do is measure using a caliper, or you can get a specific fork oil tool, which works pretty well. I'll show you one of those in the future. I don't happen to have mine on me right now. So I'm going to put about 300 mil in here, and then I'm going to show you how I measure it from the top. Before you put this oil in, make sure that you did tighten the bottom bolt all the way and the drain. So on these, 300 milliliters is kind of the average, or the fluid amount that they give you is kind of the average, but you still want to get in there with a measurement to get it right. It's not always going to be dead on what the book says. What you can do is take a digital caliper. This calls for 137 millimeters from the top of the tube to the top. So it'll be right here from the top of the tube to the top of the fluid. So a lot of these calipers will have the little arm that comes out of the back. That will be 137 millimeters right there. Got it dialed in. And all I'm going to do is rest that right on the edge of the tube and see if I'm in, just like you're checking oil, like a dipstick. There's also another tool, a fluid tool, that you set using a caliper, pretty much the same way you set that measurement, and it'll have a tube. So if you overfill it, it has a suction cup or a siphoning tool at the back where you can suck it back up, and it'll suck it up to the level that it's at. I'll use one in the future, like I said. And there we go, just the tiniest little bit on the tip there. That is pretty good. So once we got the measurement right, we can go ahead and put the long spring back in. All right, and then collapsed, it's still going to have some sticking out of top. So when we go to do the washer, and the short spring, stack those and then just lift the tube up to capture those into play. And put the cap back on and thread it in. There we go. Now, if you have a cartridge style, when you put the fluid in, you're going to have that dampening rod. You're going to want to raise that up and down a couple of times to get all the air bubbles out. This style, they're just going to pop float to the surface, and then you'll be set. So that's it. All right, so we've had a lot of difficulty trying to find plastics for this, especially these side covers. Now these are a little bit sunburnt, a little bit dry rotted, and have some pretty nasty dark staining on them. And I really can only find used ones on eBay and whatnot that look pretty much the exact same. I think they'll be usable with a little bit of elbow grease, some good chemicals, and a little bit of sandpaper to make this look like this. So that's not too bad. I think I can get away with that. So we'll show you how I scrubbed this up, what I used on it, and how to make it look a little bit nicer. First, we got to get this old decal off. Fortunately, it's just been trashed. You can try and peel what you can, but easy way, take a heat gun. All right, now we got all that old sticker off. That was no easy feat. We've got a lot of dry rot here. A lot of times on plastic, what you can do is take a flat razor blade, just very carefully scrape off a layer, that dried layer. Don't dig into it, just a light scrape, let the razor do the work. And you'll see a lot of it's just dust kind of coming off. The next thing we do is get a good scrub on it. I like to use SOS pad with soap on them. They work out really well. When you get in here and scrub this up, put it under cold water, get a good scrub on that panel. Not only does the SOS pad help get the dirt out, it is also kind of scraping off more of that sunburnt, sun-dried plastic. And you'll actually feel it getting smoother, almost like you're sanding it. I like to do this under cold water. If you do it under warm water, the plastic gets softer, and it's harder to scrub because it's warping under you. It's not going to really mess up the shape of it or anything, but when you're using cold water, the plastic stays stiffer. It's a lot easier to get a good scrub on it. It's already starting to look way better. Now, here's a plus when you're doing white plastics. Bleach. Get a good coat all over that. We'll let that sit for a while. Plus, it smells nice in here now. I'm going to throw in some 800. And then you're just going to kind of step it up. 4 to 8. And 800 is probably good enough at this point. This will just smooth it out the rest of the way. Okay, and then the last step I'm going to do is, this is a magic eraser. Kind you can get down at Dollar Tree, Dollar Store, whatever. The magic is, this is a very, very fine abrasive. So it'll help really well if you go over and polish up that plastic with it. Get in there and really scrub it down. You'll see that shine start to come through. It's almost like, using a 3000 grit sandpaper. It's a lot easier because it's on a sponge. And voila, there you go. Nice clean plastic again. All that rough, deteriorated plastic is now gone. It's nice and smooth. You can even take it one step further and polish it out, buff it out. Or if you wanted to, just go ahead and throw some clear on it. If you do, I highly recommend using something like an engine clear, an engine enamel. It's more resistant to chemicals. If you ever spill gas on this, you can wipe it off really quick. So it's a cheap alternative. I'd rather just get the new plastic, but hey, this will work for now. Well, before the side covers go on, got to put the seat on. Came back from the upholstery shop. Looks beautiful. Love it. Make sure the front gets down in the little hook. And it slides right into place. Beautiful. All right, there's 2 bolts under the seat. We got to make sure we line up the little tabs to the frame. This one's kind of a pain in the butt to get to, but get the strap, put it over the seat. You may have to kind of stretch it down over there. Make sure it's not all wrinkled up in there. That holds that down nicely. Boom. Everything's good in here. We're all tight. Yep. Slide it up under. I'm going to use a different bolt for that. Now just make sure that the strap isn't pinching anything here and there's no wrinkles. Pretty happy with that. I really like it. Got her all tuned in, fresh oil change, new filter. It's only one thing left to do.
that is going to wrap up another episode of Tank Slap TV. Talking to Brad, apparently this is going to be his new fishing vehicle. Because, you know, why use a truck when you can strap half a Bass Pro Shop on the back of your motorcycle and pray you don't drop your favorite bobber along the way. So if you see an old guy driving down the trails with a bunch of fishing rods sticking outside like he's searching for a satellite signal, don't worry, that's just Brad living his best life. But if you like what you see, hit like. Please subscribe. Comment down below. Let me know the things you want to see, maybe possible bikes that you want to see me work on. I definitely appreciate any input you can give. But like always, I appreciate you watching. Remember, keep it on two wheels. Make it not that sketchy. But whatever you do, your secret's safe with me. Till next time.